Well, happy Sunday to you, Scott Baker.
It is indeed Sunday, October 26th, 2025. Mikey, time for another edition of Lead Better. Our time to get together each day, talk about the Admired Leadership Field Note. Today is the Field Note 1599. The title, Don't Let AI Transcription Sink Your Ship. Now, before we get to that, let me just note there on 1599. Tomorrow, then, obviously, would be 1600.
Right.
I don't know that it actually matters that we would mark 4 years, 1600, 100,000 subscribers, whatever it would be. But it kind of feels cool. I don't know if it means anything, but it's like, okay, well, 1600.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
All right, so we should throw a party tomorrow.
You and me, we'll
Yeah,
get
right.
online and we'll throw a 15-minute party,
Let's do it. Yeah.
and we'll talk about a field note that we don't know what the subject is quite yet.
Now yes, exactly. Now the subject today, AI transcription. We should note that technically, we're doing this. You and I are talking in real time. It's being recorded.
Yep.
I don't know that we're running a transcription program, but we probably could, but it won't matter because this goes on to all the podcast platforms. They auto transcribe. You and I know that everything that we're saying, profound as it is will be out there forever.
Yes.
Not that anyone will necessarily 500 years from now or 5 days from now care, but it will be there. Like our great grandchildren will be like, oh, what was that a guy doing back then? And they could go look it up because it would be there.
But we are self-editing because we know that what we're saying is the permanent spot. And so even though we're putting things directly out there, and I don't know that there's ever been a time, aside from taking clips for social media, we haven't edited these even once. There may have been one time where let's cut that out. Or maybe we cut the beginning, right? Just trimmed it up a little bit. But most of it, even though it's just, they're unprepared conversations based upon the topic of the field note that's being written that day. So we know the things that are coming out of our mouth will be live, and we don't want to edit it, take the extra time. So we self-edit.
And I actually don't think that either of us have said anything in years on these conversations that we'd be like, oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, So you're right. So there's some self-editing. So to set up the idea here about, well, why would AI transcription be a bad thing? It's interesting because we've all been in meetings, I think probably, where you get on Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever it is, and somebody and you see this meeting is being recorded, or you see somebody that has one of the auto note takers and they just log it in. They don't even ask. And people are now in this process of just assuming that you will be able to just let me do this thing. And as the field note notes, there are people who are sort of, I guess it's the new version of live vlogging, except it's not live and streaming, but they wear, sorry for hitting the mic, buttons that just hear everything that's being said. And then the AI pulls all of that information back in and says, here's what your day was like. And here were the key points and the high points. You go like, oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Wait, I was there, but thank you.
Yes, right. Now, does Meta do that with the glasses, or is the battery life not long enough on Meta for it to actually record all day for you?
A good point. So I do have the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, but guess what? I don't use it really for the AI much at all. I really only use it because it's great for phone calls. Now, I have used it to take some pictures or record some video, and that's been more of a little bit of a gimmick of just trying it. Although I will say, kind of like when people have their dash cam videos on all the time, they capture stuff. It's the stuff you're not expecting that you want to just be able to go click and then take a picture or record that. And if you if you're out and you brought up your phone, it would look like, it's like, it would be weird if everybody saw you taking your phone at a certain moment, but sometimes you could record it. Now, the point here is that we have coaches, executive coaches, who are in meetings where a lot of very privileged information is being discussed between the client and the coach. And people were being like, well, I'm going to record this. And probably we have coaches who have been on a spectrum of whether this bothered them or not. But the key thinking has been, I'm going to be less candid in this coaching conversation if I know it's being recorded or notes are being taken, or this will feed back to me. So that got the thinking around the point of the field note, which is if you're an executive, if you're the leader of an organization, if you're in an organization, well, if you know that there's notes are being taken and transcripts are being recorded, and how candid are you going to be if you see some of those quotes later, and perhaps it doesn't capture when you were joking or when you were just pretending to be upset, or you were trying to kind of coax everybody towards a goal. And those quotes standing on their own could seem harsh or manipulative, and maybe they weren't. Now maybe they were, right? And but whatever that circumstance is, does the AI, the era we're entering into, and we're not even that far into it, does it suppress the actual expression and dialogue and discovery of knowledge more than it enhances it?
Yeah, I suppose it does. And even thinking about our process of making this 15-minute program here, if we had an editor and we do have an editor, but he just pulls a social clip for us, right? Andrew, who we've referenced a few times, who sits in as the producer of our show. But if we threw it to somebody who is going to actually produce this show in a very edited or tighter form, then our conversation back and forth would be going out as if maybe we would be more candid with each other. And maybe this conversation would be a little bit better because of that, right? If we had the freedom to know that everything that we're recording here is going to be edited, so if we're afraid of something coming out or coming out the wrong way, then that more candid conversation is better. Maybe we should, maybe we should, right? Is there something to that, right? Of us saying that, but that's really the whole point, whether or not that you're actually wearing an AI button that records everything that you're doing. People aren't doing that so that they can edit. They think of it in terms of like editing it personally for themselves. But, how often do you actually do that? What you're actually creating is a record for,
And records can be subpoenaed.
Yes.
They can be dissected. They can go into discovery. I mean, all kinds of things can happen. And it can be like, well, the executive made that decision. Well, what was the thinking around that, right? And you can start to go back and do some real forensics. And I mean, I think the good thing is we all know that in this world that mostly the entire legal profession and all lawyers are really forgiving. They're not about the details. They don't obsess over a little phraseology. They just kind of go like, oh wait, that's not how it is at all, right?
Right.
So you can see the nightmare, the forensic logistical nightmare that can be done. But part of this, I think, is we all know, and you is spending a lot of your adult life in sort of the social media sphere, and I've been doing things on television and online all of my life. That there is a weird element to, even when you're allowing people to look in on you, that my generation, one ahead of yours, and there's two or three after you, right? Maybe four. In a weird way, we've conditioned people not to even be sensitive to this in some way, right? There's the early generation of sort of the workforce now. They're like, well, yeah, why? Of course, people are going to be observing everything that you do. Now, I think they should be more thoughtful about that. And you need to be thinking about, like, there's all kinds of things. And it's not just like, what's the record and how can I be, will somebody catch up or make some conclusions about me that are inaccurate, that would limit my professional ambitions or things that I want to do in the world or relationships? There's a factor here about how does it shape you? What is it doing to the way that you actually present to reality and interact with reality? And I don't know that this is me being grumpy old man, that everybody in the early generations of the workforce now are thinking about that maybe as deeply as they should.
Right. Unless you're a police officer.
That was kind of right.
Well,
unless you're a police officer, yeah.
Right, because a police officer needs to have the body cam on all the time. In some states, in some counties, in some cities, that's the way that they do it. And so there nothing like kind of irritates me more than like when I'm watching some body cam footage on some program and I'm noticing that a cop turns their body cam off and on, right?
Right.
When they shouldn't, right?
Yep.
And so the fact that body cams actually have a button that they have the freedom to turn them off is understandable. They have to use the restroom. There's times where they just, they should have the freedom to be able to unplug them. Some of them don't have a button on and they're actually pulling the cable out, right? So it's an always on kind of recording. And so police officers have kind of conditioned themselves to know when they're going into a situation where they don't want it recorded. And most of the time, the general public would think of that as, oh, that's kind of a dirty move. You shouldn't do that. The reason that it's on is because it's part of the public record. So there are some professions where you're going into it where you do have to self-edit and it's good for you, right? Because you shouldn't treat certain situations in a certain way. And you shouldn't manhandle people in an illegal way, right? And you should follow the law in everything that you're doing. And so having that recording device on is something that we do expect for certain segments of our society. Now, if we had a police officer in this conversation, they would probably, lend some reason why it needs to be, aside from just using the restroom and privacy, right? That they need to have access to private conversations. But I don't think if a police officer is in a conversation with their sergeant where they don't want, the potential perp to hear what it is that they're saying, I still think they need to keep it plugged in, right? Yeah. And I think that's the reason that we have it there.
Now, let me make a pro case. It's not against the field note, but just a thought here.
Right.
We have long talked in Admired Leadership about the idea, Goffman's, research around on stage and off stage and how we are when we think we're presenting to the world and not, and that the best leaders, that there's a great deal of consistency between those things. You're not getting a different person when they're on versus when they're off.
Right.
So in some ways, if we were actually thinking that in a meeting, whether the AI transcription was on or not, my words could be reflected back to me. Right?
Yes.
I need to be the person. I don't want to ever think that I'm being a person in a private conversation that is wildly different than in a public conversation. We see this all the time. It comes out across the political spectrum. People like, oh, this text went out, or he tweeted this, or there was a private group chat, or this was in a Discord server. There've been like 5 of these cases in the last month, right? Which proves the point. But let me suggest this, because the motive for people to transcribe is, I want to capture this. There's so many things that happen, and I don't want to forget it. Now, here's the thing that's noble. And I do think that the more effortless things that we put in that remind, like I use the ReadWise app and to track things that I'm reading, to remind me of sections or quotes or points. And that's very helpful. And we do know, and we advise that how you track your wisdom and journal things that are important to you, and you go back and you review those things. That's how you make them yours. And when you take notes, and you have notebooks, and I do, those things are very helpful. Now, I have all kinds of things, and I think that there's a truth here, which is we would all think that it would be a great thing where we have an AI that is saying, I've accumulated all the things, and you're overwhelmed because the world is so much more complex than it was 100 years ago. You're going to need things that help kind of sift and tutor you through this. And there's going to be elements of that are true. But in the moment, what I know is when I take a lot of physical notes during whatever, lectures, conferences, even phone calls, I'll write down things and I go back and I look at them. And I've done things where I've transcribed things. Oh, that was a great podcast. Let me go and have a podcast. I tend to not go back to those as much.
Right.
And I think that what happens, I remember Tim Ferriss talking to a guy who's a great journalist, I can't remember his name, wrote for Esquire, and he asked him something about this, like what notes are you taking? And he said, you know what, the good stuff sticks. If it's really good, it's going to stick with you, and you're going to come back to it. And I know that, like Malcolm Gladwell, I heard him say this once before, and this was long before the AI era. I'd be interested in his opinion now. But he was saying he would transcribe his own interviews, meaning he would record an audio when he was doing an interview with somebody, recording it, but he would go back and log the interview himself. meaning he would go back and like write out, what's the quote I'm going to use in this New Yorker article? We used to do this back doing television news stories. And if you had an intern do it, the equivalent of having an AI do it, and you went through, well, let me pull out that quote and that quote, you don't get it in the same way, right? I know that from the stories that I did in television. I think that's what Gladwell was pointing to. When you go back and you really listen through a conversation and you're pulling out a key quote and you're saying that's going to go here and you're really chewing with it, that's when it starts to make a difference. Now, you could say he's doing it from an audio recording, but we're not doing that now. We're not going really and examining these things. And I think you and I know, and I think everybody out there, which is if you're in a coaching situation, somebody's coaching you and you're like, I'm going to have the AI record this on Zoom. And you're like, that was good. That was pretty good. Now, are you as really locked in on that conversation? Like if the other person is saying something profound, because you kind of know something else has got your back. And I have a feeling that you're going to get less out of those conversations rather than more. And the chances that you go back and review those transcripts, or you go back and have it highlighted in the right way, or if the AI highlights it, it's going to miss the thing that was actually the most important.
Right. Now, when we get neural links and everybody is recording all the time, even without a device, and you just know, for me to approach this person who had the neural link inserted means that I'm going to self-edit. So eventually, we'll probably all be self-editing in a lot of ways, constantly, right? Because there really won't be a choice.
Yeah, and it will, it'll be an interesting, I mentioned to you, I know a guy who has a book currently on the New York Times bestseller list called Against the Machine. And Paul Kingsnorth was recently in Pittsburgh, and I went and heard him speak. And afterwards we hung out and I drove him back to his hotel. He doesn't have a phone.
He never has.
Never had a credit card.
Yeah.
Now, he wasn't quite sure what hotel he was staying at. So it's kind of fun when you go like, all right, now we're in a modern vehicle, right? And and we can kind of like, we're not in a wagon, right? With horses, but we kind of had to go like, well, let's just figure this out.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes it's fun to unplug and just figure things out.
Yeah, it feels like you're back in the 70s, right? Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, until then, we won't edit this, right? Because I don't think there's anything that we said here that
probably good.
Go. Right. So, all right, great. We'll speak tomorrow.
Thanks, Mike.